Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie, and I apologize. We had a bit of a technical issue. I was muted during the presentation, our introduction, so I'm going to just go over that quickly right at the moment. Again, my name is Carrie, and I'm with the City of West Kelowna, and I'm helping facilitate the Q&A this evening. Welcome, and thank you for attending tonight. Before we begin, I will take a moment to introduce City staff in the room and bring a few housekeeping items to your attention. Let's begin with introductions. Mr. Paul Gyps, Chief Administrative Officer. Paul will provide an overview of the city's budget process and highlight Council's updated strategic priorities. Mr. Warren Everton, he's the Chief Financial Officer, and Warren will provide highlights of the 5-year financial plan and this year's budget. Mr. Alan Fillion, Director of Engineering and Public Works. Alan will introduce the capital program, and my co-pilot, Ms. Lisa Siavashi, Financial Services Manager, will help co-facilitate the Q&A. Now, just with a few quick housekeeping items, you should have received a package that includes the agenda as well as an overview for using Teams and a troubleshooting guide. If Teams is new to you, I will just give you a quick introduction. The budget team will be presenting through a shared screen feature, which I have on currently. Please keep in mind that during the meeting, you will be visible to all other participants. During the session, the chat box and all the dialogue between participants and the budget team will be recorded for the purposes of providing input into the 2021 budget. Microsoft Teams uses various tools, and from the top of the screen, I'll just give you a quick introduction. From left to right, the information shows the duration of the meeting, the camera, this may be turned off or on, your microphone, this may be turned off or on as well. Share screen is just a feature that we will be using as part of the budget presentation. The 3 dots means more actions, and this is where you can change your device settings. Raise hand, this can be used to notify the budget team if you have any questions. The chat box, feel free at any time to pop in any questions or comments, and the budget team will be sure to address those. And then, of course, a list of the participants that are with us this evening. And then, of course, the red icon is the end call. And so with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Gyps.
Thank you very much, Carrie, and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to help inform us and the budget process as we collect the information and bring it back to Council in the coming weeks and months to help us develop the final budget that will go forward for their consideration. Just a little bit about the process. Our budget process starts usually every July with staff reviewing where they are in the current budget, the things they know that are coming up in the next year. We put that together with our finance team so they have an idea of any significant changes or actually any changes at all. We then meet with Council and have a strategic priority and say, what are their goals and objectives for the community in the coming years? Have they changed from last year? Does it advance our planning? And from there, we then go back and look at the budget and try and identify ways to meet the strategic priorities they've identified that they would like to see. And we try to embed that within the budget so that we can carry out those objectives. So tonight, we're looking forward to comments back on their strategic priorities and on the budget, of course. Because they flow together and they work together. One of the things about what we try to do in every budget and with Council is trying to address the needs of the entire community. Our challenges, and I think you're all aware of this because you're very engaged citizens in West Kelowna. The community is only 13 years old. Our neighbors are close to 100. Some of them are over 100 years old, and they've had lots of years to develop and build their community. And we're coming out of the gate as fast as we can and trying to catch up because there's an expectation of this community to deliver the same services and provide the same opportunities as our neighbors. And that's a balance that we try to manage. New to this year, of course, we've put in the 1% infrastructure levy, and that coupled with a bit of short-term borrowing, we're hoping we can take advantage of moving the infrastructure needle a little bit forward on our deficit. And Warren will talk a little bit more about that. We've also put in a small public works crew we see an opportunity where we can advance a number of smaller projects that we never get around to. For example, some sidewalks on non-arterial roads, certainly our drainage challenges. We have significant drainage challenges. The regional district that used to operate this area under the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure had a different priority when it came to drainage, and we're left with a number of areas, and every rainfall, we cross our fingers and hope that we don't flood anybody out. So we're going to use this crew to pick up a lot of that gap that we have. And we also use them as other areas. The other big thing for this year that we're trying to look at is economic recovery for our business. It's a challenging year. We know we're coming out of a very difficult time. So we're trying to move the dial forward, trying to be as sensitive as possible, build our reserves, and support opportunities for economic growth and support. And with that, I just want to give a little overview of where we're at and what we're trying to do. I'm going to ask Mr. Warren to take this through the next steps and get into a little more details and be able to answer your questions. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for sharing your evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gips. I'll just take the next spot on the 5-year operating plan, and then I'll let Mr. Fillion kind of fill you in on a little bit of the capital plan. But hopefully everyone's had a chance to download the budget PDF. We have fairly extensive full budget binder, electronic budget binder in PDF form, 279 pages, which was pared down from previous years where it was upwards of 400 pages. So it's much more concise now at 279. Still a lot of information there, but the city handles a lot of different things, so we have to cover it all. Just looking at the plan, where it sits right now, just as an overall for a tax increase over 2020 is at a 4.05% increase over previous year. That includes, that came about at this second reading of the budget, which happened in late January. First reading of the budget was in December 10th, and it was showing a 4.75% increase at that time. But since then, our growth figures for the city have come in. Our original estimate was at 1.5%, and that's where we essentially estimate year after year. We can reliably count on about that much growth every year, but in any given year, it can be more or less. In 2020, it was 1.44%. On the completed assessment roll, it's coming in at 2.2%. So as of second reading, we kept the overall tax dollars the same and ultimately reduced the percentage from 4.75 down to 4.05. So that increase, when I talk about growth, essentially it's all the new development, it's the new people coming in the area, the new properties that will now pay property tax for the first time in 2021. So, you know, when we show it as a net at 4.05, that's, you know, the taxpayers from 2020 are seeing an increase of 4.05 because, you know, the balance of that percentage increase that gets us to 36,559 comes from the growth, which is at 2.2%. Included in the 4.05 is a 1% infrastructure levy, which equals about $350,000. So ultimately, the net operating increase is 3.05. So it's not a huge increase. The 1% infrastructure levy will allow us to take on many more capital projects. We'll be able to leverage that money for borrowing, and the focus, Mr. Fillion will get into the focus of that a little bit later. Some of the pressures on the costs of different areas of the different services. We're seeing a lot of pressures on the cost of facilities because of revenues being down. So the net increase is fairly high there at 32%, but we have received a Safe Restart grant to cover revenues that we have essentially lost or are in on hold essentially till we can go back to our regular business. Police services up about 7%, and we're approaching a full complement of members that we budget at, which is 30 members. And we typically budget a little bit less than that because it takes them a while to get to full complement, but we are reaching that. We'll also see some more pressures from that area, just with some downloading from senior government, as well as City of West Kelowna taking on more percentage of its own costs that Kelowna has been helping us out with. Our actual cost per capita is quite low compared to other municipalities our size, and as we mature, we will be going to covering all of our own costs. Road maintenance is up about 3%. There's some contract cost inflation there and wages. Information services up 4.5%, and there's a lot of sort of software purchases from that have to do with COVID and being able to operate more online. That also can be covered from the Safe Restart grant. Human resources, which includes safety, is up about 8%, and that safety side has been accelerated because of COVID. Min costs about 2.5% up, engineering 2.5%, reserves are up 4.3%. Capital, which is funded from reserves and borrowing, reserves including what are called DCCs. We had about 16.3 million in the general fund, and 19.3 million in water, 18.5 million of which is for the Rose Valley Water Treatment Plant. So it's a little bit of an anomalous year with the capital spending because it has that borrowing in the mix. Water and sewer are both their own self-funding areas through user fees, separate bylaws. That's why they don't affect the overall tax rate, tax increase. And when all is said and done, the bottom line of the budget, there's what are called discretionary funds. So it's money that is not allocated in the budget and can be used by council to either reduce taxes or fund reserves further or fund new resources, that kind of thing. So through the two readings, we started with 935,000, which had sort of one-time savings of $131,000, which can only be used in 1 year because it's savings from delay of hiring resources, that kind of thing. When we look at what was put on hold from previous year, plus the new resources for this year, that equated to about 540,000 that came out of there. That left about 264,000 and about 248,000 going to reserves. Water rates include a flat portion and a variable portion. The fees for the water systems were adopted in the previous council meeting. That was this week, actually. It was just a few days ago. It seems like forever over the last 2 days. And have gone up to an average of $907 a year, 684 of which are the flat rates, and the balance is the variable rates. Now flipping to that average per household, I really like this screen. It just really gives you a sense of everything breaks out to the average house. Average house has gone up to, in value on the assessment roll, 655,000. Current rates will lead to about $2,145 per household, and as well as about $1,400 in user fees, which include solid waste at $200, sewer about $426, and water at $907. The solid waste and sewer rates are staying relatively flat to previous year. Water is up to $907, which was right on schedule of a 4-year schedule that we had planned out with the upgrades and implementation of the water treatment plants. Another review of those fees will happen later this year for any increases in the future. Looking down at the bottom part of that screen and looking at the tax dollars, which break out into roads maintenance about 209. General government is 459, which includes some COVID mitigation spending, and includes the restart grant money to offset lost revenues. The transfer of reserves are there, which are not too dissimilar to the previous year. Fire, police, and bylaw, about $646 per household. It's percentage-wise, the percentage has gone down a little bit of the overall budget, but the spending has gone up. Fire is relatively flat. Police is definitely rising. Facilities remain about the same with help of the Restart grant, and the same as recreation. That's pretty much it on the operating side, just for a quick overview. If we want to talk about capital, we can go to the next sheet, and maybe Mr. Fillion, you can just talk about a few of the projects.
Thank you, Warren, and good evening, everybody. I too just want to quickly say thank you to you all. We appreciate you taking your time out tonight so that we can hear your thoughts about strategic priorities in the budget. I'm just going to quickly highlight some of the major capital projects, and then we're going to turn it over to you folks, because again, really we want to hear from you guys tonight. So top of the list there is Rose Valley Water Treatment Plant. This is our largest and most important project. Work was started actually last year on this project, but it does reflect in the 2021 budget, $23.5 million, which is the debt servicing for the treatment plant, as Mr. Everton previously mentioned. Really good news on this project. Last week, the main tender closed for construction of the plant and the associated reservoir, and came in at about $5 million under what our estimate was. So it puts us in a good position starting off on the project. Obviously, the borrowing associated with the plant, we will only borrow what is necessary. So hopefully with that encouraging pricing that we received last week, we can limit the amount we need to borrow for that project. So next on the list is Stevens Bartley Shannon Lake Road roundabout. So if any of you come through Shannon Lake Road in the morning and through this intersection, you can probably certainly appreciate that this intersection is currently failing as designed now with the three-way stop there. And so we will be looking to build a roundabout there. It is also the location of the future Public Works yard at the northeast corner of that intersection. And so, of course, that's going to only further exacerbate the problem at that intersection. So associated with that roundabout, we will be providing sewer service to that site so that it can facilitate future construction of the Public Works yard. And we will also be constructing active transportation improvements, sidewalks and bike lanes. So along Shannon Lake Road currently from Gulf Course Drive to the bridge on Shannon Lake Road, there is sidewalk. And so we're going to connect from that existing sidewalk through the Bartley, Shannon Lake Road, Stevens intersection, all the way to Dominion Road, which is where we have to tie in the sewer. So it's very cost effective to do these projects at the same time. And it helps us to further our active transportation goals. And that ties in nicely with some other grant programs that I'll speak to in a couple of minutes here related to sidewalks as well. So next project on the list there is Gallatley Carrington roundabout as well. So again, a very challenging intersection for us. Lots of development, ongoing development in that area. And so the problem is only getting worse. And so it's imperative that we upgrade that intersection for safety reasons. And again, the project itself is limited to the Gallatley Carrington intersection, but as there is sidewalk from the highway down to Witt Road currently, as part of this project, we're going to extend a path from Witt Road down to the waterfront along Smith Creek so that we will connect the waterfront basically all the way through to downtown. And then again, ultimately with some of our other projects, we'll connect from downtown right through to Rose Valley and Lakeview and build a real nice connection throughout the city. Next project on the list is Glen Rosa Reservoir Expansion. This one technically isn't in the 2021 budget. It's a carry forward item, but it's a fairly significant project, so we felt it was worth mentioning. Primarily related to fire flow requirements and associated with development. So majority of that project is funded from development from DCC's developer cost contribution, as well as a contribution from a specific developer. So that project is actually currently out for tender right now. Below that, we have Stevens, Shannon Lake Road, active transportation improvements. So we've applied for 2 grants, essentially from Okanagan Road. On old Okanagan Road by Village at Smith Creek, we have sidewalk up to that point. We're looking to connect the sidewalk from there, heading northeast through to Shannon Lake Regional Park, through WFN territory as well. And from that point, there's a section of sidewalk again beyond there. So ultimately trying to build the whole connection right through to Westlake Road. And then of course from Westlake Road, there's existing sidewalk that goes up into the Rose Valley neighborhood, also goes across the highway up Hudson and into Lakeview Heights, which ties into the new wine trail. And so it's really a vision of building a connection right throughout the city. The second part of that grant application is on Stevens Road from Dominion to Westlake. So again, it would complete almost that entire connection from the waterfront all the way up through to those Rose Valley neighborhoods. Next on the list is the pedestrian improvement program. So this is our 1.2 million as a typical budget we have for pedestrian improvements, primarily related to filling in gaps around schools. So again, it's a function of developing as a rural community, not having a lot of this infrastructure in place in the first place. And so we're playing a lot of catch up. And of course, ensuring that we have safe means of transportation around schools is the top priority. And then that program would expand out from there once we've addressed those higher priorities. Below that, we have the road rehab program. Again, this is a typical budget every year of about 1.2 million. This really is an asset management program. So it's primarily paving, and roads in particular are an asset such that if the asphalt gets to a point where you let it go too far, then you lose your base and your subsurface, and the project gets a lot more expensive than if you catch the asphalt paving at the right time. And so it's very important that we stay on top of this program and ensure that we are not letting ourselves get to a point of deterioration where that becomes an impact. So we're currently developing this program right now. Roads that are on the list that we're reviewing: Gill Road, Pedersen Road, Bartley Road, Alhambra Drive, Shannon Place, Sandstone Drive, Alexandria Way, Whispering Hills Drive, and Bering Road. So you can see it spread out quite a bit throughout the community. Below that, we have park development. Carrot Park is located at the corner of Witt and Majuro. So again, this is in an area where there's a lot of ongoing development, and so it'll be a nice neighborhood park with a playground and some other amenities there. And then finally at the bottom is the City Hall project for design and construction management services. And so that's really all I wanted to touch on at a high level. And then, like I said, we want to turn it over to you folks so that we can hear from you.
Hi there. We're just having a problem to unmute you all, so we're working on that right now. Just one moment.
I think we have a way to mask that meeting.
But you probably stop sharing too, and then
So on the right side of your screen, you should have a microphone. If you would like to just unmute yourself, then you can ask questions of the project or the budget team.
Yes, good evening. This is Gord Eves. I've got a question. I raised it, I guess, on the survey, but I was wondering if you could tell me what plans the city has in place for this year in terms of improving cycling lanes, accessibility, particularly on Boucherie Road, which I think is quite unsafe for cycling because it's such a busy road and fairly tight. Thank you.
It's about, and we actually see it. And I live right down there myself, and I see people walking along the side of the road, bicyclists trying to pass, especially during some of those S curves around Quillsgate, et cetera. One of the things we're looking at right now, we're trying to do is we're working with some property owners in the area to see how we can partner with them to get some right of way to develop it. The development of that road in a formal way is exceptionally expensive. We spent a lot of money along Boucherie over the previous years, and we know the rest of the community, we got to do some work there. So that's sort of where we're concentrating on that. And that's why you've seen it on the upper side of the town. But equally as important is the safety end of it. So it's our goal to have something in place so that those can be done as well. We have a small group of a team that if we're not working on digging up and working on the main aspect of Boucherie, but adjacent to it, we think we can find a connection between some private properties with some right-of-ways and make that happen. It's a top priority for us because we know that. It's we haven't put it specifically listed in the budget because it requires us to work with some partners. But I hear you, I see it, and that's definitely something that I know I'm working on personally with a couple of the key players.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other plans for this year for cycling lanes, new cycling lanes?
Yes, thank you, Gord, for the question. So all the work that we're looking at doing along the Shannon Lake corridor that I just spoke to will incorporate bike lanes as well as sidewalk addition. So anytime we undertake a sidewalk program or any program like that, we're always trying to incorporate bike lanes where we can as best and feasible as possible with the associated roadway. Obviously, we recognize, that in some instances, if you're able to make them separated, obviously that's the best case scenario, but that's not always possible. Like what we did on the wine trail, we received lots of positive feedback about that. But it's certainly a lens that we're always looking at. We certainly appreciate that it's a need, and again, it's one of those infrastructure gaps that we have from the way we developed. Lots of people here at the city of West Kelowna ride their bikes to work, and even more so. So e-bikes, of course, have taken off, and the demand for that's only going to get greater, obviously. So certainly appreciate the comments. Certainly looking at that lens. The other thing we're doing this year as well, I should have mentioned, is a transportation master plan, and that's really going to look at all modes of transportation and highlight all these needs and develop some key connections for us, bike lanes, sidewalks, all those things. So very important topic.
I guess just carrying forward from the previous individual mentioning about the bike lanes, I'm also curious, is there any plans on any sort of sidewalking bike lanes from the bridge into the downtown area? Because you're traveling through, especially if you're on bicycle, you're traveling down the 97 highway to get into the downtown area.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, John, for the question and excellent point. I think we're trying to create a good corridor along Stevens Lake, or from West Lake on Stevens through to Shannon Lake that would ultimately go into Old Oak and feed right into the downtown. So that would be one good option apart from the highway. Of course, on the other side, we do have the wine trail and the upgrades that we've done there. And then as we just talked about, we'd like to continue with those upgrades when we can and complete that connection ultimately as well. And at the same time, we're working with highways. Highways are looking at some projects for upgrades to some of the intersections, interchanges on West Side. And so I know I've been personally pushing them really hard to incorporate separated bike paths as part of that.
Would that come under the province as far as, because it's the 97 highway, as far as doing that sort of thing?
The projects associated with the interchanges along the highway right away would, yes, that's correct, John.
Fair enough, thank you.
Hi there, I have a question. My name's Mike Prosser, and I was just wondering about the hydro. You saw the disaster that happened in Texas here. I know Doug and Gord have been fighting for redundant power, and we don't have it. Is the city, got something in the budget or prepared for a disaster like that the one line goes down, and is there something in the budget to protect us?
So actually, we've been talking about that a lot lately. And one of the things that we talked about was some of our critical services, such as water, during a power failure along those lines. And I know for the last several budgets and in this budget, we're advancing generator backup power wherever we can. I mean, that's an interim measure. Our conversations with BC Hydro in the last 2 months, 3 months have been very promising in their advancing another priority instead of twinning the service from Merit. We think that has got lots of challenges and timing issues. They've recently had conversations, and I can't go too deep into this because of my commitment to confidentiality, but I know they're having conversations right now with Fortis, West Bank First Nation, and ourselves on creating another link across the water. Of course, that's a priority of our council, and we're talking with the minister responsible for BC Hydro and how fast that can get to design so that we can do that. It's a very real concern. In the interim, we're trying to do a few things so that we can maintain some essential services such as water, sewer, along those lines. But no, we certainly don't have enough to support the whole community in that end of it.
The $5 million you just saved on that contract you just signed couldn't be used for generators or something to protect the water.
Yeah, and that's where we can use it actually, is on the water system, because we're not allowed to use money from a utility into anything but the utility itself. So I do know, I was talking with Alan earlier this week, and just what generators we're missing to ensure that we can maintain our water utility continuous through a power outage. So good comments, Michael. Thank you.
I have another question. I noticed in your 5-year plan, I mean, everything's 6%. Any particular, I mean, it couldn't have taken much time to prepare that. Is there any reason why it's 6, not 4, not 10? I mean, is it just a pick of the number?
Yeah, I can answer that question, Michael. Essentially, we're trying to build in similar numbers each year and show a little bit of change from year to year. So, if we deviate from that, it's going to come right out of the operating side, because there is the 1% for infrastructure built in there, and there's the 1.5% essentially for growth. So, that ultimately leads to the net being about 4.5%. And you take that 1% off, that's 3.5%. So, we could estimate a little lower than that. We had been in the past estimating that base being 3% year over year. But as of last year, I upped it to 3.5%. So that's, when you add those other factors on there, that's where it comes out to 6%. But the growth depending on the growth from year to year, like this year, we're seeing a benefit of that growth being higher than estimate, so that rate can come down. But yeah, it's sort of worst case scenario really that is built into those estimates.
No, but when you,
for the,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, but when I prepare budgets for large corporations, and, the devil's in the details. And, when you go into these summary sheets that, I'm just looking at these summary pages and I see 6% on everything, cemetery going up 6%, every year, really? I mean, it's just a plug to make the final numbers work. And it just doesn't seem to be the, all your comments are valid, obviously, but, when you see this kind of detail and everything is just 6% added on to, library 6%, cemetery 6%, communication 6%, everything. I don't know how you respond to that, I guess. One final question. I know you changed this growth number in 2021 to 2.2% because you said it was off the roll, but to lower the taxes to 405. I noticed the growth though from the expenditure side is 1.5. Shouldn't the growth, if you're going to adjust one, shouldn't you adjust the other? I mean, your growth that you used in this forecast, right, is always you're using it to reduce the taxes on the bottom line there. And then, except in 2021, where you reduce it more to get our taxes. I mean, is our taxes really going to be 405 or is it going to be 4.75?
Well, that 405, like I said earlier, is just a relative term for, taxpayers from 2020, what kind of increase they'll see. So that's exactly what they'll see. When this budget is adopted, if it's adopted at this rate, it'll be adopted at that 36,559,184. So that will stick. So if the growth comes in even a little bit higher than that on the final roll, that'll still be the number. So we're just working with the best numbers we have right now. But once it's adopted, that total tax rate or total tax dollar number will be what's built into the tax rates on each of the various classes. So no, it won't change.
Okay.
I'd just like to add a little bit there. The province mandates that we got to do a 5-year projection. Like we can't do a 1 or 2 year budget. We have to do a 5-year.
Yeah.
And typically cities, we don't like that because we have to put a number out there. And I can tell you, if we're out 1 penny, we hear about it. Especially if it's up. If it's 1 penny down, it's not as bad news. And so as our finance team looks forward, the other challenge we've got is we're only 13 years old. And I'll be blunt here. I'm in it for a year and a half now at the city. And we've got a lot of learning to do with what's coming at us. The way it ran as a regional district, and I used to work at a regional district, a lot of things were left to chance. A lot of things weren't budgeted and planned for. And at 13, I'm looking at all the gaps and things we have to do. And I'll give you a glimpse into next year's budget and what we're talking about at the senior management team is we know next year, and Mr. Everton mentioned at the beginning there, we know next year our police services is going to change significantly. We know it tremendously. And it's hard to forecast that because the federal government isn't really giving us a whole lot of real numbers. The province is saying guesstimate about this much. We know that as we evolved in the last 13 years, a lot of our services to support police services were delivered out of the city of Kelowna. City of Kelowna is facing the same challenges we are with what's coming down in the next year and growth and their needs for increased police services. And they said, we're looking at our joint services agreement. And quite honestly, our neighboring communities, and I'll speak about us, West Kelowna, you're not carrying your share. And we're giving you notice now that you have to. So as we go forward, all these little things are popping up. And Michael, I absolutely agree that if we could nail this down a little tighter, I'm seeing in years to come, we will. In my previous organizations, we could forecast quite comfortably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 years out. We knew our capital program, we knew our operating growth because we've been in business long enough. We knew where our debts were, our infrastructure gaps are. We knew what was coming down the pipe. But at 13 years old, we're still discovering all these things that weren't done. I would love to say we'll get it right next year. We'll get it more right. But little things keep surprising us that weren't planned for when we came a city, took over from the regional district. It was a big shock. And like I say, I'm just discovering that, and so is the rest of the team. And wow, we didn't plan for that. We didn't know about that. So, and I'm not trying to dance around it, but that is reality. So we've got a number in there, fingers crossed, that will come in under and not over. So we're afraid to lower it below 6 because I just don't know what's coming. I don't know if that helps any, but I'd rather be a penny high than a penny low.
I feel your pain in the early childhood of the city. I get that, and I understand your need for reserves, and certainly applaud you for that. One of my concerns, though, is to deal with COVID and what we've gone through over this last year, and I expect probably this year also, as far as the economic burden on your city workers and residents within the city of West Kelowna. So I'm curious, and I wanted a little bit more of your thoughts on that, as far as the 1% levy and positioning that where it is right now and over the next 3 or 4 or 5 more years, along with, of course, the 11% water rate increase that is coming also. So these kind of increases and the 1% adding to that 4.05 tax increase seem a little substantial in the recovery phase from COVID. And I don't expect that recovery phase will last or will last probably for the next couple of years, because you'll have another year that we're in right now. And then hopefully with the distribution of the vaccine and the get back to work for everybody, we'll have a recovery year starting to happen next year. So what are your thoughts on that? Sure,
and thanks for that question, John. You know, the 1% levy is part of the 405, so it's not addition to.
Yes.
And here's our challenge: is we have this huge debt in infrastructure. We just don't have money, and there's never a good time. Last year wasn't a good time. We started off 2.8% in deficit from the previous year due to previous decisions. I'll leave it at that. So we put in 4.8%, then council came back and changed it to a 2.8%, and that was zero increase. I look forward, and what we're trying to do right now is if we put a 1% levy on it, yes, it's shown in the next 5 years, but each year that's a council decision. It's not this decision. This decision is for this year. If we put 1% forward right now, that's $20 a household. The average house is $20. But that'll give us $350,000. That $350,000 will pay the principal and interest on a short-term loan for 5 years of $1.8 million. $1.8 million will put in significant amount of infrastructure, sidewalks, bike lanes, and that's what it's being used for. And that $350,000 will keep, and that money will be used to pay off that $1.8 million in 5 years. If we do it again next year, same thing. And if we do that for 5 years, we don't need to have that levy going forward, because now all of a sudden we have an additional $2 million that's just going right into infrastructure every year. We won't need to carry on the levy. Maybe councils will decide in the future there's other things, but if we can suck it up for 5 years, we've created an infrastructure, bank that can put in $2 million on things that we desperately need. So it's one of those ones that if we don't start, when do we start? Because we're 13 years old. Everybody, not everybody, a lot of people say, look across at Kelowna, Penticton, Vernon, all the other communities say, well, they've got all this stuff. Why don't you? Oh, we're 13, we're a teenager, and we got to start planning to move out sooner or later and grow up. And so that's been my advice to council. And because I hear exactly the same thing you guys are hearing. Ooh, let's get it done. Why aren't we got this fixed? Why aren't we fixing drainage? Why aren't we doing this? And I got duck ponds in pavement roads all over the place. When are we gonna fix those? I tell you, the list and emails we get every day about fixing stuff that's infrastructure related. So that's sort of our thinking behind it. But each year, council will make the decision whether or not they'll keep that 1%. I promise you, we're going to run this organization as lean as we can, as tight as we can. I live in it. I pay the taxes too. I'm drinking the Rose Valley water. Not for long, but it's going to be better. But I get it. And it's a real balance with trying to support the community during this difficult time. We're trying to offset a lot of costs with the COVID money, but they're one-time costs. So it's a real balance. And that's sort of the advice to council. Like, let's see what we can do, but it's $20 a house. It's about $50 a business. So that's kind of where we're at. And we think it's really critical that we keep that. And that's just my opinion. Of course, council has the full right. They're the leaders.
You were quite happy though when they kept it on.
Yeah, there's so much that we got to get done, and it's really nice to be able to deliver the things that people are asking for, the paved roads, the bike lanes, the sidewalks, and seeing people walk along the edge of a road. Whoa, I drive by it, I see it, and I feel that it's part of my responsibility to.
And you know where I live, so you know that's what we're doing all the time. So
Yes.
Along Campbell Road. I guess some of the areas that I'd like to see, and you talk about saving money and stuff like that, is one of the things is the cash grants and non-cash grants and how they're debited out, and how loosely I'll say the non-cash grants are debited out. And of course, based on what happened with COVID, a lot of those programs didn't come into play as far as the usage of those non-cash grants. But certainly, I think there has to be a better system as far as the giving out of those cash grants and kind of the auditing format that has to take place, because some of the ones, as you well know, were used for different purposes over this previous year, or the previous year, because of COVID and the programs not being able to run. So they use them for other purposes. So I didn't quite agree with that, because council is voting on, the specific amount of cash going for what they've applied for, and then they're using it for something else because that program didn't take place. So that kind of irritated me a bit. And then also the format as far as the cash grant that they get as a part of their budget. Well, that's kind of a loosely played game, especially when you're dealing, for instance, the Canadian Red Cross budget was $11,842,000, and they requested $15,000. So that becomes a very low percentage to their budget, so it looks a lot more attractive. Whereas you have some organizations which are totally relying on their budget for the cash grants. So these kind of things have to be kind of worked out, in my opinion anyway, to kind of make it a lot more accountable for the different organizations applying. What are your thoughts?
Well, I believe council asked us to look at that program in its entirety this year, and to come back with a new process. Certainly, there's got to be some accountability in that. The last one I was at, this isn't unique to West Kelowna. Last community I was at, we required certain things, including proof of the grant, where it was done, pictures shown, comments back. Okay, what's been done? How was it used? Was it this, and the other thing? And other places have it said, well, it can't be, they're one-time grants to do things. They can't be sustainability grants. So they shouldn't operate just because we're feeding the money.
Right.
So, there's all sorts of things that I think, as a team, we need to sit down and bring our ideas and say, here, council, here's what the other jurisdictions are using. Here's some consistency. Here's some good practices. Because every community struggles with this. I'll be honest with you, it's a small amount of money. in the size of our entire budget.
Mhm.
But it can have such a big impact to those communities that do a lot of things we can't do. For instance, community associations. I see tremendous value in those as partners, even just getting our message out so that we're reaching down and we get the message back on what the communities need. So with all that said, council has asked us to do a look at the community grant process and what we're going to do and how we're going to bring it forward. So, share your ideas, send them in to me. Like I say, we're going to sit down as a staff team and put some thoughts to it prior to the next budget process, which starts in July. And we'll start working that through council and get some ideas, and then we'll be able to inform all those others as soon as possible that there's changes coming, if there is. But they're good comments, John. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks. Yeah, especially in the non-cash end of things is another area, because it's not, you're not giving out any money. You're allowing people to use facilities free of charge, basically, for their purposes. It was just given out a little too freely during the council sessions that I've seen on the budget. So I kind of wanted to question that a bit.
And if I can add to that, John, council really wanted to look at a new policy for grants and aid, which is understandable, hasn't been looked at for a while. And the beauty of being in local government too is we can look to our partner municipalities and look at best practices and
Yes.
and do some polling and get some policies from others who have updated. And so that's definitely on our radar, and we'll look at that later in the year.
Hi there, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, I'm new to West Kelowna as of November. I moved here from Kingston, Ontario, and my name is Dave Plumpton, and I'm so happy I moved here, and I'm just catching up on things now. So I'm so happy at what I'm hearing tonight. I've been involved in other community organizations and boards of governors, and boy, I know what budgets are and where to find, try to find money and spend money wisely. And I'm so glad that I heard the words lean and mean tonight from Mr. Johnson, Stephen. So that's great. I know that there's some pain when trying to stand alone and grow up and get projects going and all that. But I can tell you that as I get more involved, I'm going to try and help my best with some of the experience and background I've had. And I was really interested in your government building, that project, the City Hall and the library. And I'm just going to give you a couple of quick things that I ran into in the past with some organizations from South Frontenac up in Sydenham. Very interesting community. 14 million in reserves so far. We really knew how to squirrel away the money, and we knew how to spend it wisely. And the taxpayers up there own a small base of 18,000, maybe another 6,000 summer people, but an aging population. Not a lot of new development because the development was kept to a minimum. We wanted to preserve a lot of the lakes and the nature and stuff, and it's coming. I know it's coming, but anyways, the seniors now are having some problems staying in their homes and paying their taxes. And you should look at that in the future. It's going to be a bigger problem, but it's been proven that to keep seniors at home rather than in facilities, and COVID, this whole experience the last year has been a big eye opener on what happens in some of these homes. But to keep seniors in the homes, they live longer in their own homes. But we've got to watch the taxes and how we treat seniors. I'm a senior myself. I'm a lucky senior. I'm only 69, but I'm still working at my choice. I tried to retire a couple times. It didn't quite work out. I just had to keep working. So my wife and I are lucky, but there's going to be a bunch of other people that aren't that lucky and that can't afford to really pay their taxes and stay in their homes unless they get deferred. And this is something that's being tried in other communities. The taxes are deferred until they die or until the property is sold, and you're still going to get your taxes back. I mean, you're still first in line. So think about that. That's for the future.
That's already implemented in BC, by the way.
Well, is it in West Kelowna?
Yes.
Oh, didn't realize that. Well, then see there, I'm educated again. That's good. So,
I am
so-
deferring my
all
taxes.
right, that's great. So with the and I won't take up any more time, but I'm very impressed with what I've heard tonight. But with the community building, the offices, what we looked at in Sydenham was a hub. So there are a lot of nonprofits, community organizations that have trouble paying the rent, having a facility. And in the future, I don't know if it's possible to build onto this thing. Doesn't scare me at the price tag right now, but if you can get more rent coming in from these other organizations, you'll have tenants. You'll have tenants lined up, throwing money at you to get a spot to rent, like you do with the MPP and the MP there. And also, when different Lions Club organizations and legions and all these other people are having trouble, holding on to their own properties, they would actually rent a community space from you inside that building. Maybe it's attached to the library, a meeting room like we did in Sydenham. And it was booked 6 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. And it really, it made that community center a hub. That community building. So you had your council meetings, in the nighttime, and you had your daily functions in the daytime with staff, but then you had these other things going on in the meeting rooms. And so think about that for the future. And if I can put some notes together and grab some of the initiatives we did in the past up in Sydenham, I'll certainly pass them on to you. So I'm glad to be part of this community, and I live I live along Shannon Lake. I live in the highlands of Shannon Lake, so I see that area is really going to be developed, with with that roundabout, which is really needed, and some better sidewalks and so on. So I feel blessed that I picked that area, but I'd like to help any way I can, contribute to this great organization of West Kelowna, and with anything that I've done in the past to help pass some knowledge along that may help in the future.
Well, thanks, Dave. And a couple things I got to just share with you. You tricked something here. We've got our names are listed as Stephen Johnson, and Stephen Johnson's actually a counselor. I just sitting in his chair in council chambers. So I don't know if I said something and get him into trouble or make him good, but I should clarify. My name is Paul Jeps, and I'm the city manager, and I'm not Stephen Johnson.
Okay.
So that's really important because I don't want to get people line up throwing darts at him. I didn't say anything. So that's one thing, and that's good to know for next time. As John mentioned, BC has a very strong tax deferral program, and that's completely available. There's lots of links to it on our website, lots of information through our finance department. If you know anybody that's struggling or needs that information, they can certainly just reach out through our main number, and we've got exceptional staff that will talk them through it and guide them and give them all the connections that they need to. So we're pleased that that's an option, especially with a growing city and an aging community, and I get it. A little bit about City Hall and the library building. It's a needed facility, and I won't go into that whole end of it, but what we have done is we built a fair bit of reserves. We have 7 million in reserves. We want to borrow up to 11 million potentially. We now have an equity partner in the building with the Okanagan Regional Library who actually wants to buy equity. They don't want to lease. So we're working on that. We'll retain ownership of the land. But when you're building a building like that and the library comes in as about a 1/3 partner in the building, 1/3 of all your base building costs, 1/3 of your development site costs, 1/3 of all your planning design costs, all those things now get shared. So I like to think that we'll make that within there. The 11 million that we're borrowing, we've been putting aside almost $700,000 a year for a number of years on rent for ourselves. And now we can use that as principal, a payment of principal and interest. So there's no net increase, and we can actually get into the market. And hopefully, if we're quick enough, we'll catch this rush downwards for construction costs instead of the rush upwards, which we were seeing. Certainly, we want to support those community associations, those user groups, those people that help provide the extended service, which makes a community. Local government can't be everything to everybody, and we really rely on all the different user groups that do that. And that's why that whole thing about giving out funds and access to some of our facilities is key, but it's finding that balance that John talked about and in trying to find some accountability to it. With the City Hall, we will be looking at what opportunities when we can share, but this also will free up some more of the Lion Center, which is an area that we try, that's very well divvied up, and we rent that space out, or we lease that space out, or we grant that space out to a lot of user groups. And this will create some more opportunities there. So they're all good comments that you made. I'd love to hear what you've learned in other areas. Send me a list, because you know what? You can always learn something. And that's something I find every day in this job, every hour in this job, somebody goes, did you know? And I go, no. So thank you.
Going to look at one item that I kind of singled out because I've basically commented on this item previously as far as street lighting and the costs of the street lighting. And you put off the LED part of upgrading your street lighting until 2023. So on my street here, I've sent in requests for the street lighting to be adjusted, because sometimes it's on 24/7. In fact, most of the time it's on 24/7. So there's a lot of burning of the street lighting budget just on our cul-de-sac here. So I just wanted to get your thoughts as far as maybe moving that LED program based on the cost effectiveness of lowering your street lighting costs of $420,000.
Thanks, John. Great comments. I've actually had this conversation just this past week with my team that we're going to review that program this year with the lens of trying to advance it. It does pay for itself quite quickly, and of course with the advances over the last few years, even quicker than it was a few years ago. So it does pay for itself quite quickly. And of course, a number of the lights in West Kelowna are BC Hydro lights as well, and of course they're switching out to LEDs as well. So hopefully in the next short term, 2-3 years, all our fixtures will be converted over to LED.
Perfect.
If I can go to the maintenance aspect of certain lights too, when there are lights, so if they're on steel poles, chances are they're ours. If they're on wooden poles, they're generally BC Hydros. And I don't know if you've called them lately. They don't really come running out to change a light very quickly. We get lots of calls about this light's been waiting to be changed for 6 months. When are you going to get at it, City? And I know Alan's team regularly phones Hydro and reminds them, when are you going to send your contractor to change lights? Because we can't. So if they're on steel poles, call often. If they're on wooden poles, send emails and we can send them on to Hydro.
Yeah, these are actually our lights as the City of West Kelowna lights. So
okay.
Yeah.
Call often and
Al knows about them.
Point made. Thank you.
If nobody else has comments, I can keep on going here. I was just wondering about the recreational programs and stuff like that, and the costs, as well as the parks revenue, dome revenue, museum revenue, et cetera, et cetera. How was that affected during this past year with COVID? What kind of a drop did we have with those kind of revenues coming in?
I can answer that, John. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but facilities and recreation together, it's in the sort of $600,000 to $800,000 range. We're looking at, slight recovery for this year, but still, we're going to be using some of that COVID restart grant money to fill in those gaps from the previous year. There's about 1.2 million in total being applied to 2020. Some of that's covering actual COVID spending, creating this new council chambers, spreading people out, plexiglass, all the PPE and the regimes have gone into that too. There's probably about 500,000 there just on spending in that way. We've pivoted. changed up things and still managed to run a number of programs in recreation. But some of the more lucrative ones, you just can't maybe run as well as, you know, some of the hockey programs where you could really stack them onto each other. You have to have breaks in between, that kind of thing. So, you know, you just run out of time to collect the same kind of revenue. So, you know, the drops haven't been as drastic as, you know, they could have been. And West Kelowna is reasonably resilient in that way. We don't have big convention centers and that kind of thing that are just sitting idle, or casinos that we own and things like that that other municipalities have. So so our arenas and our you know, rec programs have remained reasonably stable. You know, that's not a huge drop compared to what it could have been, or what we've seen in other municipalities. So yeah, that, you know, bit of a roundabout answer, but at the most it's upwards of 600,000 to 800,000 on that side, and that includes the facilities too. You know, because they sort of tie into each other, obviously. So.
I'll add one more thing to that. And something that we did during COVID is we, as our numbers dropped using the ice surface in some of the facilities, we pivoted those members of the team and moved them into other areas where we saw an uptick. So for instance, a number of our facility workers went to work in the parks department because everybody was trying to get outside. So that's some of the things that we did to try and manage costs in the light of reduced revenues. And that's something we're looking at, and we're still looking at. And Warren, looking after the finances, also oversees recreation. And so he's right on top of that, of how can we mitigate costs when we drop revenues, and how can we protect that. So just to give you a little background on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was great of you guys doing that, because I was just seeing the wages associated with those recreational facilities, and if you were able to rotate them and use them in other avenues, that's a great idea for sure.
And we kept them still expensed to the area that they came from, because that's, you know, we had budgeted that way.
Yes.
Instead of loading up on one part of the operation and reducing the other, you know, that's harder to explain. So we just kept that consistent.
Yeah, good job.
I have one more question, if I may, and I apologize. It probably was covered while I was struggling to figure out how to call into the session in the first 15 minutes. But there was a large item on there, I think close to $11 million transfer to savings. Would you please tell me a little bit more about that, and what that's appropriated for, and if yeah. If the BC government is mandating this on cities, I don't know very much about it. Thank you.
I think you would be talking about the transfers to reserve. Is that? And that,
yeah,
essentially that is our savings, and that essentially goes in to support the reserves that support the capital projects. So those reserves at 10+ million will go into various, you know, capital reserves. Some go into equipment reserves, and some are, you know, other types of sort of operating reserves as well. So yeah, that essentially is our savings program. There isn't any amounts mandated by the government. We do have to have certain statutory reserves, like a capital reserve, to be able to fund projects. It's part of the, you know, mix of funding where you collect and save money up front for these, you know, like a 10-year capital plan, as well as look at, you know, what portion can you borrow. So sometimes, like, we're using the 1% infrastructure levy to leverage more money to be able to borrow 1.8 million with 350,000 collected and collected every year, which becomes a payment on a larger loan. Essentially, yeah, it's part of that overall planning, that much more long-term planning than the 5-year, because there's certain things that are needs of the community to expand various capital needs, or to replace or to enhance as well. So essentially, yeah, it's not mandated, but it's highly encouraged. And the more that's kind of downloaded from the province, we have to take care of ourselves. You know, as when we became a municipality, we took over roads. So we went from rural roads to now city roads. So that requires a lot of savings to get to that city level. I don't know if that answers it, but it's kind of a broad summary.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other comments, I'd certainly like to thank you guys for all the work that you do. I know, as Mr. Gibbs says, it's a young city, and I certainly appreciate that. And I'll just mention to Dave that I moved here 3 years ago, David, from just north of Toronto. So welcome from Ontario.
Great, great. I'm still trying to get the gas prices in line in this town.
Yeah, well,
Holy cow.
the best thing you could do is that's why the bike lanes. So, and yeah, the gas prices are a little bit different, and a few other things you'll notice. But anyway, yeah, you're well taken care of here. I've really appreciated not only the work the city workers do, but also council. Council's been very very scrupulous with their with what they give out and everything else. But with us doing our bit, I think that just helps everybody out. And as Paul said, you know, you always learn something from everybody, and there's a lot of talent out in our community. And if that talent is brought into helping the city flourish and grow, then we're all going to benefit from that.
Yep, well said, John. Very good. Yep.
Okay. Hi, my name is Carrie, and I just wanted to extend my appreciation for your participation tonight. Online engagement is really not the same as face-to-face. We really miss it, but it looks like we're going to be in it for a little bit yet. However, I'd like to invite you to continue to stay connected with us. We have a lot of exciting things happening. We have the Transportation Master Plan, as Alan mentioned. We have the official community plan update that will happen as well in the spring. And then, of course, we have the City Hall Library building. We have the preliminary and detailed design community engagement that we'll be doing. So it's going to be a pretty busy year for us. So I hope you stay connected with us, certainly on all of our channels, and connect with us online as much as possible. And hopefully we'll get to the point where we'll be able to do this face-to-face.
You're here.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Okay, good night now. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.